Hello, class, and welcome to Chapter 2, which is about the employment relationship. So, again, this chapter, just a couple of kind of quick things I want you to know. Again, now that we're kind of moving along in the early part of the semester, we're kind of gearing up for what we're going to be building on each week. But for now, for Chapter 2, there's just a few things that I want you to know. Not a real heavy chapter as far as material, but the chapter is kind of divided into two parts. One about, what is an employee, and the second part is what is an employer. And I'll get to the second one here in a second. But for an employee, here's kind of the main points I want you to know. Is there's a great discussion about, being an employee versus being an independent contractor. So, and I'm sure you've heard this term independent contractor before. So really what I want you to know is what to consider between the two. Obviously, if you're an employee working for a company or an organization, that company, has a lot of authority over you from the perspective, like, let's just say you work for a big company that makes cars, for example. When you go to work, they're going to give you the tools to do the job. They're going to, give you a break. They're going to, handle your health insurance. They're going to give you your vacation. They're going to make sure that, you're in a safe work environment. They're going to give you all these instruction manuals about how to do the job. They're basically helping guide you throughout the workplace. Whereas as the direct opposite of that, being an independent contractor, kind of what it says, you have a lot more independent authority to make your own decisions. So let's just use that same example with a company making cars. An independent contractor might be somebody who comes in, they're probably going to bring their own tools. They're probably going to, if they have any helpers, it's going to be their own assistants. They'll come in, they'll do something very specific. Let's just say they provide, they provide something, whatever that is, and then they will leave, and then the company will pay them separately. But that person, we're not, telling them how to do their job. They're just coming in, performing a task or whatever, and then they leave. So, we always want to consider, how much authority an employer has over an employee, and that will dictate if they're an employee of the company or if they're an independent contractor. And there's a lot of case law out there about when an employer thinks that they're hiring an independent contractor, but they have so much authority over the employee that they might as well be an employee. So make sure you read in your book the differences between an employee and an independent contractor, and essentially, what to consider and how you determine which is which. There's a further example about temporary workers. And again, and temp workers are very, very common these days because, again, generally, an employer doesn't have to pay them health insurance. They don't have to give them vacation. They come in for a very specific time. And I think the most obvious example is like retail workers at Christmas time. You see a lot of high school and college students, will come home from school, work at a retail store for, maybe the end of November, all of December, and the first part of January before they go back to school, just to get through the Christmas season. That's a great example of a temporary worker. So, but again, employers have to be real careful with temporaries because if they go beyond a certain amount of time, and that's different in every single state, they could start becoming an employee, and the employer could owe them things like vacation and benefits and things along those lines. So make sure you understand the nuances of temporary workers. Taking that a step further about student workers and interns, and I'm sure a lot of you have either been student workers or have done internships, and I think that, obviously with student workers, usually, you're sitting at a desk in an office and, maybe doing some more, secretarial type duties, just to earn money so you can study and, earn some extra money. Student workers is pretty straightforward. Interns, I think the biggest thing about interns is, obviously generally they're for a summer, usually, from the end of school to the start of the next semester. But again, a lot of people have internships that last year round. And I think one of the biggest, legal aspects with interns right now is whether or not they should be paid. When I was a student, obviously I did unpaid internships as well as paid internships. Obviously the paid ones are a little bit better. But with the unpaid, most companies especially are offering paid internships. That's more of the common trend. You work, you get paid for that work. But if a company or an organization offers an unpaid internship, and you see this a lot more in like nonprofits and things, you want to make sure that, are they offering you college credit? Are they giving you, a good reference? What else are they giving you other than money if you're going to do an unpaid? So make sure you understand what what interns would receive if they're not getting paid specifically. So, And then finally, volunteers. Volunteers, it is what it says. You don't get paid. There's very little authority over that person. And, let's just say somebody volunteers to work a concession stand at a baseball game. If they're not doing their job and they're not, properly taking in money and they're giving out a poor product, whoever's running that concession stand can just say, thank you, you can leave. There's no expectation of pay or of continued employment. It's just the volunteers. So again, I'm not too concerned that the differences about with volunteers, but just kind of know the general aspect of it. Well, and there's a small second part of the chapter that talks about, what is an employer? And they go into things like agency and joint employers and things like that. I actually don't even want you to even worry about what is an employer, because that's getting into a little bit more of the weeds than I want to get into in this class. Again, if this was like an advanced business law class or advanced labor law, we'd go into a lot more detail about what an employer is. But for our purposes, I want you to read through that part of the chapter, but just know I'm not going to test you on any part of what is an employer, agency, joint employers, things along those lines. So again, please read the full chapter, but again, I won't quiz you or test you on any of those details, but at least just kind of know what makes an employer. So those are the main points for chapter 2. And again, if you have any questions, let me know, but next we'll be on to chapter 3. Thanks, everyone.